for us as the next generation. I'd just like to understand from you. You've written a book called Calling Sehmat. It was your first book, and as a first book, it got published, you said, in 6 languages. It became one of the top 50 books in the world. And it was also appreciated by Jeffrey Archer. And for those who may not know, Calling Sehmat was adapted into a box office hit starring Alia Bhatt called Razi. So Razi was in fact based on a book written by Mr. Sikka. I'd just like to understand from you, sir, how did you stumble upon this absolutely fascinating story?
Thank you, Devika. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I retired prematurely from Indian Navy in 1993 and joined Piramal Group. When I went to Kargil as an embedded journalist, it was with the feeling, Fauj ka namak khaya hai. I was president of Piramals at that point of time. Things happened which should not have happened, or I did things which perhaps I shouldn't have done. And one officer stood up and said that not everybody is a traitor, sir. My mother wasn't. And that is what led to research of this book, Calling Sehmat. It took me 8 years. But when I finished this, I knew I had a winner. I wanted to tell the story my way. And when in 2008, one of the biggest public films in filmmakers in Bombay, it's all in Google, so I don't need to say this, came to Delhi to ask for this book, I put some conditions which are unheard of even today. I said, this is the money I want. It was in crores, not in lakhs. I will decide who will direct, and I will decide who will act. And that gentleman, his name is Samar Khan, he went back and said something which left a bad taste in mouth. But that's the problem that we authors face today, that we are taken for granted. Give the book away for pittance. I'll come to that a little later. But I waited, thanks to Bollywood's pressure on isolating me for 10 years. But I waited patiently. There was no dearth for me, or there was no desire or desperation for me to put this book up front. In 2018, the Penguin came up, which never happens. Penguin will not take a second-hand book. First it was published by Konark, and then Penguin comes in. And then that book took wings, and it has not come down ever. 6 languages. It became amongst the top 50 books globally ever written on espionage. Jeffrey Archer invited me to London and had held the book on his chest and said, push this up, tell the world what you have written. He also made a statement, said, I don't know, I can't figure out the writing in your book which is missing. It took me 1 week to understand what he has said. Having said that, Sehmat became my role model in many which ways. A woman-centric film became a message to the Bollywood and rest of the world that what Guru Nanak said, So kyu manda akhiye jit jamme rajan, why demean her who gives birth even to the kings? So this is how this entire story, how she sacrificed her family. We don't know much about Jhansi Ki Rani also.
Yes.
So this is where we are, vis-a-vis Calling Sehmat. And this is where we are about a woman's journey to fight for India and succeed.
To be a patriot. And Mr. Sikka, both of your books, you've also now, Vichoda has been published. Both of your books are women-centric. And of course, if you can just, inform our audiences, what is it like to take, even today, a female-centric book, a female-centric story and character to producers? What is the sort of response and reaction that you get? Because quite interestingly, what happens is that somehow female characters end up becoming a part of a so-called feminist history. People say, oh, we haven't studied feminist history, so we don't know much about the women who, let's say, our freedom struggle, or women like Sehmat Khan. So I'd just like to understand your perspective on that. Why is it a part of a feminist history? Why is it not a part of mainstream history?
In India, in particular, when a child is born and if it is a girl, you see eyebrows go up even now. And if a second child is also girl, there's a problem with the mother. You know, despite the fact that what Guru Nanak said about women, he raised the level of women much higher. The fact of the life is that largest number of female infanticide is in a state called Punjab. So we, the so-called Sikhs, are using Guru Nanak as a dhanda, as a business. We want boys first. But we are all sitting in a very nice hotel. And if you had a choice to eat maa ka khana, maa ke haath ke bana khana, or a 5-star, where will you go? The answer is very simple. So I realized that each story that is coming in my lap has much more to say. When writing Vichoda, you will be mesmerized. I'm telling you, you'll have to pardon my English, which is English, and I'm not an author, it's an accidental author, you may call it. I asked, how did you manage to kill a 6'2" Pathan, an SHO? And you are such a petite woman. And she answered so beautifully that the God residing within me is far superior and powerful than any enemy outside. Now, what kind of faith she had that she went about searching for her 2 children, aged 9 months and 2 years, and searched them out 65 years later and succeeded. And in the process, she killed people. You see, we are forgetting the role that women played during partition. They were butchered, raped, and those who survived and came back still began a family, still ran a family. We are demeaning them, we are not giving them their due. And my belief in this aspect that women must not be shown as just a piece of sexual object. They have much more to give. They are giving much more, but we're still not giving them enough. That is why Vichoda, I did not want to give it to any Tom, Dick and Harry, and waited patiently like I did in Razi. For Razi, I waited 10 years. Vichoda, I did not have to wait much longer. Maddock has come on board. I have 4 more books in the pipeline, written during COVID period. You will see each role that woman has played. Some of them are not women-centric, but the main hero would be woman. And as an author, I'm insisting that I will co-produce. I will be part and parcel of any changes. So you demand something, if you're successful, and last but not the least, if you do not care, where is this money going to come and where will it go? They will listen to you.
And Mr. Sikka, you also said that a lot of authors such as yourself, be them accidental authors, people who come across very fascinating stories and then they decide to research on them, put them on paper, make them a part of our history. Such authors, you said, their stories are taken away at a pittance. What can be done to ensure that we encourage authors to actually do research on our past the way it is required? Because when you write a book like Calling Sehmat, a huge part of the partition story becomes a digestible chunk rather than, when we as kids read it in a political science books in school.
Razi taught me a lesson of my life. I had to go to Arnab's show and actually lambast Mr. Gulzar because at his request I made his daughter the director, and they removed tricolor from the film. They demeaned our intelligence agencies, but praised armed Pakistani army, showed Pakistani flag. This is not what they brought her as in a depressed state, which she did not come as that. Now, this so-called leftist attitude by Bollywood is not acceptable to a soldier, period. Now, you're saying that what are we doing for writers, or what are writers? They're dependent on the producers. No, it is not that. Content provider is a big deal in this country. If your content is good, So this is the situation. What is the solution? Effective 1st of October, we are setting up a company where we shall buy good content. Your content has to be good. And not only give you your advance, the author, he will be taken as a partner in a film.
Right.
So he will not be just thrown as a, piece of, crap and then thrown it away. His name will appear on the screen. This film is based on so-and-so author's book.
Right.
Give that writer, that content provider his due. I think that time is coming. And I'll need your good wishes and blessings that we have succeeded in this. We have already begun buying, by the way. A gentleman by the name Rajnikant Puranik. He's no more. He was in 4-stage cancer when I met him. And he wrote a book by the name Nehru's 97 Major Blunders. Ladies and gentlemen, read this book. It's an eye-opener. It will become a film. And his daughters will be partners.
Absolutely. Sikaji, thank you so much for giving that insight. I'll also quickly bring in Mr. Rajesh Singh. Thank you, sir, for waiting patiently. You've written a book on Sikh separatism, a history of conflict. I'd just like to understand from you, when we talk about Sikh separatism, why do we forget that it was, in fact, a part of a very bloody and a very large partition movement?
Yes, of course, and that's also written in the book. Now, when we talk of Sikh separatism, it certainly doesn't mean that the entire Sikh community is engaged in separatist activities, yes, or that they did not play any role in the freedom struggle. I have actually mentioned in the book that the Sikh leaders in the run-up to the partition from the 40s onwards, and when I talk of the Sikh leaders, I am speaking of Sikh leaders both in the Shiromani Akali Dal and the Congress party. They were absolutely opposed to partition. Absolutely opposed to partition, and they made that known. The only Sikh leaders who were backing the idea of Pakistan were from the communist camp. So that was the reality then. And along with everybody else, every other leader, the Sikh community leaders stood solidly in opposition to partition. But you see, what happened was that from 1940s onwards, as it started becoming increasingly clear that partition is going to be a reality, and there was no way that partition could be avoided. The Muslim League had arm twisted the British, the Congress party, everybody else, and it became obvious that partition was just a matter of months or a few years down the line. Now the Sikh leaders then, even though they did not like the idea of Pakistan being created, and when they realized that Pakistan was eventually going to be created regardless of their opposition, and I'm now talking about the Sikh leaders from the Shiromani Akali Dal camp, they also then understood that if India is going to be partitioned along religious lines, then there was nothing to stop Punjab also from being partitioned. And that is when they then turned their attention towards keeping areas intact in Punjab,
yes,
towards their side. You see, the Sikh leaders were, the last thing that the Sikhs during that time wanted was to end up living in an Islamic regime. So therefore, they started their campaign to ensure that the majority of the Punjab region remained with India. Of course, that happened. Unfortunately, Nankana Sahib went the other side. But so therefore, they did play a major role.
Yes.
And you see, I just want to say one thing. There is one towering figure, about whom generally in the popular narrative we do not speak much, and that is Master Tara Singh. Now, Master Tara Singh during those days was possibly the tallest Sikh leader in the Akali Dal camp. Now, a controversial figure, but he was one person who spoke out strongly against the Sikh community wanting to leave India or have a Sikh nation or whatever. And he said that the future of the Sikhs lay with India. So he was one person. Of course, a number of things happened later on, and his last few years were in political disgrace. I don't think we have the time to go into all of that. But we tend to forget his contribution to keeping the Sikh community within the country.
Absolutely. Rajesh Singh ji, I wish we had more time, of course, with both of you to carry forward this conversation, but that's all the time that we have today at the Festival of Ideas. But I'm sure with all of your insight, everybody in the audience and watching us also on NewsX will take away something, and there's, of course, food for thought for everyone to think about. Thank you so much for joining us.
Big round of applause, please. Big round of applause. Thank you, Devika, for that interesting session.